Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to all of you today. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. I'm Ankur Lohani from FindYourFit, and I welcome you all to the fifth session of Empowered. As you're all aware, Empowered is a school wellness program focused on students' holistic well-being. Through these engaging webinars, we aim to empower principals and teachers with techniques to enhance children's academic resilience and support their overall mental well-being. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed panelists for today. Anju ma'am. Dr. Anju Chazot is the founder-director of Mahatma Gandhi International School with over 25 years of experience. She developed the GRL pedagogy, promoting joyful and experiential learning. She also holds a PhD from King's College. Dr. Anju is recognized internationally for her work in exclusive education and reforms. Welcome, ma'am, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you. And hello, everyone.
Mr. Ganesh Kohli is an educator, counselor, and founder of the IC3 Movement. The IC3 Movement promotes school counseling in 90-plus countries. With 27 years of experience, he has guided 4,000-plus students and supports educational institutions globally. He also leads the AHA movement, promoting mindfulness and meditation. We welcome you today, sir. Thank you so much for giving us time.
Thank you, Ankur, for having me. Thank you.
Before we start the session, I'd like to request everyone in the audience to kindly keep themselves on mute. We'll also have a short Q&A in the next 40 minutes. So we request all of you to kindly put your questions in the chat box. We shall be taking them up at the end of the session. Over to Anju ma'am and Ganesh sir.
Thank you very much, Ankur, and welcome everybody to today's session. This is a very important topic, very dear to my heart also. And I know it's very dear also to Ganesh's heart. So we'll start off immediately. Ganesh, welcome to this discussion today. And the topic is from competition to competence. And I thought we would first perhaps try to unravel and unpack what do we even mean by competition and why are we even moving away from competition. So Ganesh, before I put in my two-bit, what do you consider? What do we mean by competition? What does it entail?
Thank you, Anju. And I'll take a couple of minutes, but before I share my perspectives, I want to invite all the friends joining us today to give us a gift. Give us the gift of your presence. So as many of you as possible that can come on camera, we'd really like, I love to see human faces and it just makes it so much more worthwhile. So we promise you we'll make this next hour meaningful and engaging and we really want all of you to be part of this conversation. And I'm just so thrilled to see Nirali and Ritesh be the first ones to come on camera. And one of my teachers who I learned a lot from was Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese master who also ran the Plum Village in France. And he was interviewing with Oprah Winfrey once, and she asked him, when there is a squabbling couple, what's the best way? Do you give them gifts? You give flowers? You give chocolates? He says, you just say to your partner, he said, they'll all not work, but you just say to your partner, darling, I'm here for you. Darling, I'm here for you. And your partner says it back to you, darling, I know you are there. And he said that that's one of the most beautiful gifts you can give to anybody, which is the gift of your presence. So I really invite all of you to be giving yourself the gift of your presence and also give us the gift of your presence. And I promise to be present throughout this session. Anju, competition to competence. Competition is fundamentally not bad if it is with your own self. Competition that is born out of acute comparisons, competition that pushes us on borrowed paths, competition which is consistently outward focused, is really what we are questioning.
Right.
So for me, we are comparing our children, young children in primary school, around the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they draw, the way they do math, the way they look. When this comparison becomes acute, competition is born. When this competition, competitive examinations, competition to get into universities, everybody is going to quota, going to study, do this or that. It's all this pressure outside. When this competition becomes acute, violence is born. And that violence often is self-inflicted. That violence is inflicted on my own self. We have a pandemic with mental health and student suicides in India. This is directly born out of acute comparisons which led to competition, acute competition which led to violence. So really, if there has to be competition, it has to be with yourself, being a better version of myself today than I was yesterday. The benchmark becomes the self, and competition, as I see it, is often on the outside. The way we talk about competition is on the outside. Competence is on the inside. And discovering competence is a skill, it's an art, it's a science, and it requires educators like all of us to invest energies to understand this subject and help young people discover competence. Competence is inside, competition is outside. You can't stop competition, you can't shut the outside world. But when you marry competition, the outside, with competence, the inside, you bring some peace and well-being in the world. So I'm going to start with this note, Anju, but now back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Ganesh. I think you're right. Competition is so much about comparison, and we are so conditioned to comparing. And schools fall into that paradigm also because the boards are there. There's a competitive exam at the end of the, school, specifically after 12. But of course, we do not need to push kids into competitiveness at a young age because exams are really at the end. And you're right, moment you talk about competition, we understand competitive exams. It's linked so closely to exams actually, and performance and performativity. So children always, required to perform. And this idea of this distinction between competition and competence, which is internal versus external, is so important. And of course, when we talk about competence, then we are saying that something that is unique to the child needs to be brought out. And competition also has this idea about rivalry, isn't it? Like two big multinationals may be competing against each other. So it's always against somebody that we compete. We are trying to outperform somebody. There's a rivalry there. Now, while that may be required in sports or some things, maybe certain domain areas, and even there we are not always sure because there's a lot of more of collaborative efforts. But definitely, it is not a good idea to push kids at a young age, into competitive paradigms and performances. So I want to ask you now, Ganesh, why should we move away from competition? What's the impact of competition? Because a lot of schools are going to think, yeah, but the world out there is competitive. How can we not teach our children to compete? After all, baad mein to jana hi hai, schools ke baad, end of the schooling. The world is like that. What, according to you, is the impact of this competitiveness?
So, while this theme, actually, this was our theme for 2024, from competition to competence, it doesn't suggest that we disregard competition. Actually, the root of the word competition and competence is the same.
Same, yes.
And we are not saying disregard competition, but competition really becomes a challenge and brings suffering when it is, when it is really coming out of fear. It is coming out of the fear of not having something or the fear of not fitting in. 500 of my friends are being sent away for coaching to an institute. And I just feel like I'll be a misfit and I'm scared. If I don't go for coaching, what will happen to my life? So now I am actually making a choice out of that fear. What we are saying is when there is a conscious effort on discovering your competence, of finding purpose and meaning in everyday life, in everyday school life, in every geography class, in every school assembly, in every sports day, in every annual day, in every competition as well, finding purpose in that competition as well. You call that is really when competition becomes healthy. What I call healthy competition is I choose to compete out of love, not out of
Out
fear,
of fear. Yeah, absolutely.
not out of losing out, that I will lose out. And that generally takes our children onto borrowed paths. The choices we make out of fear take us on borrowed paths. Borrowed paths bring mental health and well-being crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, because there is no resonance between what I'm good at, what I want to do with my life, but I'm just trying to fit in with other people's, other systems. And I think also that, the paradigm of competition has come from the idea of survival. It's like a rat race and you need to survive. And I keep saying that survival, this idea of survival of the fittest is an exclusionary paradigm because only one person is going to be the fittest. It's a superlative. So rather than the idea of survival, we need to think about thriving, thrival. If we could all thrive, because thriving would mean inclusion, that we can all thrive. We all have different abilities. We all have different gifts. And I can develop that competence, which is in resonance with my purpose, my passion, my interests, my skills. So you're very much right. You did have a very interesting talk on NDTV, Ganesh, where you came out with some data, which was government data, and you spoke about the massive number of student suicides. I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, just for the benefit of all our listeners.
Sure. So the number one reason for adolescent deaths around the world is road accidents. In India, it is suicide. That was a startling fact. Nowhere. And if you look at India's population in the age group of 0 to 24, in the last 10 years, that population has gone from 582 million to 581 million. And guess what has happened with student suicides in the same period? They have actually gone from 6,500 to 13,500. There's a 64% increase in suicides with a drop in population. It is not just an increase, and a lot of it goes unreported. These numbers are startling. Actually, for every one student that takes that extreme step, there are hundreds and hundreds of others who are close to taking that step. And we are pushing our children to the edge.
Yeah.
For choosing a path that is essentially a repetition of the past, for choosing a path that no longer works. I'm an engineer by education, but also by accident. I also went through IIT coaching. I didn't end up at an IIT. I ended up at a different engineering college. But the reality is that all engineers, even my time, mechanical engineers, instrumentation engineers, civil engineers, production engineers, everybody did IT jobs. They worked for Infosys, Wipro, Mastech, and a few other companies. That's all. And believe it or not, the BCom and the BSc students also went to NIIT and worked for the same companies at the same salary. But we were told engineering will lead to nirvana. I think engineers are great. I am an engineer. I'm a proud engineer. But the reality is I wanted to be a math teacher. I ended up being a math teacher. But the fact is that we are seeing this increase. everybody's become so conscious, so outward. How do I look? Social media, all that is external.
Yeah.
It's all about fitting in and looking okay. It's all about comparison. And comparison is one of the cancers of the human mind.
Yeah.
And when that gets extreme, we have all of these problems. So, Anju, the data that I shared with you, there's more to it. I mean, student suicides have grown at 4%, whereas
And during,
overall suicides have grown at 2%.
but
So
what's
that's
the
double the
period?
rate. Hmm?
Ganesh, what's the period in which these suicides have been? During which years? Do you
So
have
this is the NCRB data that we had from 2012 to 2022, but we actually went deep into the last 2 decades, and there's a consistent pattern, upward trend. And you would be amazed. We talk about it only in the context of the premier institutes of the country, but it's happening across the board.
It is, yes.
Actually, Kota ranks way down in that. It is one of the many, but there are so many states.
Yeah.
All across the country, this is happening at every kind of institution.
Yes.
And
And I
so,
think, has there been a surge? Sorry, I'm just cutting, but has there been a surge after COVID? Is it also after COVID? Are we seeing a surge in this?
actually, we don't have any data. Again, we rely on government data to study it and come up with this analysis. But we are currently doing some additional research, which is more direct, that we are conducting.
Right.
But I have no data to
Right.
say that
No, I
there's
think
any trend change with COVID.
right. But in any case, the data itself is very alarming. And I just want to add that in 2016, the Lancet Commission for Mental Health came out with this data also, a projection that in the years to come, depression, anxiety, and mental ill health is going to be a major issue. It's going to be like a pandemic. And India, because it's a young country, young demography, it's going to be very vulnerable in this aspect. And we are beginning to see that because, like you rightly said, it's happening across the board. Whatever your kind of school, whatever city you're in, young people are feeling, and due to a range of factors. But with the student, mental ill health, what, according to you, Ganesh, is the first important factor that's putting so much of pressure on children? Which is the most important factor out of all these?
Actually, do you want me to give you,
Just
I can
the first
give you the 2,000 feet view and the 20 feet view. I'll give you both of those. Let me go down right to the 20 feet view. Actually, academics and fun are two different things. And this is, every adult, and I invite as many people to join us on camera as possible. And thank you, Suprabha ma'am, and others who came on camera for a bit, Ritesh and others. But, if you look at this, those people who are complaining about work-life balance as adults, they are essentially saying that work is the punishment, Monday to Friday, life is weekend, reward. Morning to evening, punishment, evening, Netflix thriller, reward. Work-life balance. It's not personal life, professional life balance. It's work-life balance that we talk about. These are the same people who got bored often in school, where academics was separate, fun was separate. Social media is fun. Football is fun. Music is fun. All of that is fun, and academics is separate. So really, this segregation of academics and fun, and Anju, who better than you to talk about bringing joy to learning, etc. But I'm just sharing my perspective here.
Absolutely.
And when I walk onto the football field and I play a game of football, and I can see what a parabola is, or I can study geometry or algebra there, or I understand, mathematics on a football field, then math class and football field is equally exciting. Where basically, we grew up to saying, you do your homework, then you will get to play. Hello, homework is the play, and play is the homework.
Yeah.
But we've actually created these silos. So the same people who talk about work-life balance talk about academics and fun. Social media can actually be an attraction instead of a distraction. If
Right.
teachers know how to bring competence, how to actually contextualize learning, and therefore counseling is important. Every teacher as a counselor who can help young people answer 3 questions with every activity. Actually, extracurricular activity is an ugly word.
Absolutely, I agree.
It is immersive curriculum
Yeah.
that we are talking about.
Hmm.
And 3 questions every teacher needs to answer in every class, in every activity, in every action in school. Who will benefit or who will use what I am learning? Where will it be used and how will it be used? And where is it right now? You're teaching me physics and you are not able to show me the physics in the classroom or in my bedroom, from gravity to acoustics to concave convex lenses to how
Absolutely.
focal length is changing. Show me the economics on my table. Why? Show me economics with chair. Why is the chair not made of gold? Economics of value. Why is it not made of heavy metal? Economics of weight. Tell me everything that you are teaching me is in
Yeah.
my life. The
Yeah.
teacher is obsessed about the examination, Anju. That's what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. That's
And
what's.
they think that cracking the examination, the only way to crack it is by studying. But actually, you are studying when you are contextualizing in much deeper ways. So when we started to implement this program, the counseling laboratory pedagogy, what we found is they're producing better marks in exams. But this time, not out of fear of exams, but out of love for the subject. A
Right.
student never hates or loves a
Oh,
subject.
it's true. I mean, if you ask everybody around, what was your favorite subject, it'll invariably be linked to the favorite teacher. A teacher who actually gave joy, children loved that subject. If they were scared of the teacher, they hated that subject. And also now, the NEP 2020 is talking about no silos. It is talking about joyful learning as a policy framework. The NCF has also come out on, to implement that. And that's a very important direction now to take, because we all know it. And I don't know why education has always been this bitter pill to swallow, or like an injection that you have to take. Why human beings love learning? Why shouldn't we just have learning in joyful ways? Why shouldn't that extracurricular thing that the children have become the curriculum? And that's just the trick. It's that switch. It's a way of doing things. So if I can learn through the annual function, if I can learn through the sports event, if I can learn through the field trip, then learning will become contextualized. It will be connected with real life, and it will be joyful. It will be meaningful, because otherwise so many things, what teachers, and what you also said, we're sometimes teaching things which are redundant. The world has changed so much that a lot of things which have gone into textbooks now, by the time the textbooks come out, the world has already changed. It's almost 180-degree shift, sometimes even 360. And that information is already no longer valid. So why are we wasting time in rote learning? Now I understand that 12th grade is an important step, but why bother kids till grade 9? Till grade 9, all through the primary, there is so much of scope to do joyful learning and transdisciplinary learning. But now coming back to another question, Ganesh, about competence. What kind of competencies do you think are important in the world to come?
My understanding and my definition of competence is something that is within us and is to be discovered. I will give you an example. I met this girl in Lucknow who said that I want to study law or medicine. And she knew everything about law, she knew everything about medicine, but she knew nothing about herself. Competence is really something that you discover when you look within and when you have context and when you actually have those sort of experiences. And in general, I met a 26-year-old dentist once who told me that I'm fed up of looking at ugly teeth for 5 years. I want to study hospitality management. And I said, if only you had looked into people's mouth when you were in 11th grade and not had to go through this suffering. And you'd meet another dentist another time and you'd say it's art. I know a lot of painters who are dentists who actually paint. They're artists. So actually, when you discovered that you want to exist at the intersection of art and science or medicine, you could actually be a dentist and you actually could do art inside people's mouths.
Yeah.
So I think knowing what your learning style is, discovering who you are, discovering a little bit about the sort of things that you like to do, not just the subjects that I like, but individuals have, some people have better motor skills and they're better with their hand. Some people like to work by themselves and be in a zone. Some people like stuff around the brain. Some people like stuff that's more around the heart. Actually, we never really delve into these subjects, and I can go on for 2 hours on this, but basically, competence is actually discovering yourself. It's a investigative process. Just like we are investigating what our friends are doing, what people are doing outside, what colleges they are going, what exams they are giving, like that, we also investigate who we are. And when these two marry, when competition and competence, the outside and the inner marry, that's when we start to bring well-being in the decision making.
Yeah, because, and I like the way you put it, because what happens is that then you try to outperform yourself. You're not working against anybody. You're just trying to better your own self, and it's a self-improvement journey all throughout. So that's such a lovely thing. And I like the way that you put focus on that, because competence also involves skills. Generally, when we talk about competencies and competence, people think in terms of skills. And actually, skills are just part of the umbrella, the larger umbrella of competence. And if schools open up the space for young people to question, what is it that I want to do with my life? What drives me? What do I love doing? And what is it that I don't like to do? Then at least they'll begin thinking and not get swayed by peer pressure and other kinds of pressures that they're often under. So, yes, I think one more thing about competition and competence would be, in practical terms, is also to do with assessment procedures. When we talk about competition, we are often talking about normative and summative assessments, but it's a normative way of assessing. You're comparing, and it is linked to competition, grades, marks, ranks, classification, hierarchies. Children are put into slots. And sadly, none of the boards, whichever the board may be in the world, hardly any board will ever be able to genuinely examine or look at what are the child's qualities. Is leadership rewarded? Is honesty rewarded? What's the point of being a gold medalist in medicine and become a doctor if you can't control your anger? So, those are the issue. And we've seen that so often in people, that they don't have these, they're not able to, the human qualities are not there. And in the world to come, perhaps, I hope there'll be a shift back, to focus on that. So assessment procedures, I was talking about that. There's one is, of course, the competitive way of assessing, and the other one, which is summative assessment, marks-driven assessment. The other is competence. And when we talk about that, then we're talking about formative ways of assessing. Formative assessment will be giving feedback to a young child or a young adult and saying that this is where you can improve. This is what worked and what you did. And often it becomes task-based. So it's not just topic-based. It's not rote learning. It is actually a task that the child has to carry out. Let's say you might be asking a young child to recite a poem. You might be asking a young child to dribble the ball and jump or whatever, or to cook a meal. So these are tasks that children have to carry out. And in that, there is some sort of feedback which is given. And that is what gives them, allows them to become better aware of themselves. So in that context, I also want to add that the holistic progress card, which is a part of the NEP 2020 now, the HPC, which hasn't yet been entirely implemented, but foundational years have started. It talks about the holistic assessment also of children. The problem with all these coaching factories and the pressures on children is because what are you assessing really? The child is lost, the young person is lost. And we need to come back to a space where we can validate a child. Much of it has been judgment driven. So this is not a judgment on the child. It is just a way to help and support the child to do better. So I think this is also a point that I thought I should make, that moving from competition to competence also means changing our assessment practices. Is there any other thing that you'd like to add, Ganesh, in terms of what should schools really do in order to, given the fact that, okay, schools have their own practice in so many years, what can they do to encourage the development of competence in their classes?
Bring humility among the educators.
Mm-hmm.
The children are born divine, spontaneous, playful, wondrous. We are adulterating them. And as educators, I find, and I work with many, many schools, we are completely committing 100% of our time with students. It is not a healthy thing for the student and not a healthy thing for the educator. At least 20 to 30% of the day or the time has to go on self-development and professional development. Our teachers are the most uncared for community in our country and in many parts of the world. Teachers have not gotten their due. You know, if you go to when in my early years, I would go to a social gathering, I would have a doctor walk up, everybody saluting the doctor, a pilot walk up, everybody salutes the pilot. But they asked me, what do you do? I said, I teach. You teach? Where do you teach? You know, it's almost disdainful. The teacher made the doctor, the teacher made the pilot, the teacher made the politician. So teachers are all soul doctors. They actually are remembered for 60 years. Most of us on this call will not remember a doctor you met in 8th grade, but you will remember your teacher from 8th or 9th grade. That means that you're going to be remembered for 60 years. And we really need to empower our teachers. So Anju, for me, if one thing schools need to do is forget about working with the children, you'll do the work with the children, but make sure that there is humility among teachers to sit on a chair called I don't know or I want to know, to actually self-develop, to invest 20 to 30% of their time on being a better version of themselves. Because children are going to learn through modeling. A teacher can inspire or a teacher can completely crush the being of a child.
Yeah.
And so I think that is going to be the most important piece. That's how you will allow for competence to develop.
Yeah.
And I did want to go back to Anju something, and I can see some questions in the chat box. So maybe I know you may want to go there.
Yeah.
But you know, education is not a punishment. We are conditioned. You talked about young people, their prefrontal cortex, their thinking brain is growing. That's why you allow them to vote or marry or whatever after 18 or 21 years of age. You allow them to drive or drink or whatever because their thinking brain is not fully developed. So when are most of our educators working with children? While their thinking brain is developing, what are they looking for when the thinking brain is developing? They're looking for adventure. How do they find that adventure? Either in their academics, either in school or on social media or a computer game. And therefore, you know, I grew up with my mother having shared a saying with me when she used to say, in Hindi, Vidya Grahan Karna lohe ke chane chabane ke barabar hai. That means that to get knowledge or to educate yourself is like biting iron nuts. That's how, but actually that's how we were taught at one point of time.
Yeah.
But now it is not so difficult if the child is looking for adventure. The child is full of energy. And if we can find a way for them to find the adventure in their academics, then to your point, every academic subject is a skill. Math is a skill. Physics is a skill. Language is a skill.
Yeah.
It is no longer an academic subject. That's what counseling does. Every teacher as a counselor makes every subject as a skill. And therefore, many urban, many rural pockets, marginalized schools that we work with, what we find is kids are not going to go beyond 9th grade or 10th grade. They are going to go into workforce.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what have they left with? They are not even getting into a coaching class or into a university. They have not left with any skills because they were never taught subjects in a way that the academic subject was a skill. So skill building is automatic when competence is the focus, when you are helping young people find context in the classroom.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, Anju.
Yeah, thanks, Ganesh, because I think one of the big issues has always been employability. We have a lot of young people coming out from the educational systems. They don't know what to do with their life, and they don't have the necessary skills to also get employment. So the issue is, of course, how do we and we need the schools need to change drastically, but it can begin with small steps so that our children become ready, future ready. Because the content has gone out of the window now. The content is everywhere. Content is accessible on your phone. Of course, what kind of content is a different issue. So the critical thinking will be important. The skills that we need, the competencies we need for tomorrow's world are very different. And I think if we make the shift from that very hard-edged, marks-driven, performative kind of competition, which put pressure on the child, towards competence, where the child knows what is it that I'm good at, what do I want to do with my life, that will then ease the pressure, because every child has a contribution to make in the world. The world needs a very, very different skill sets. If you recall, a few years ago, I think a few decades ago, autistic children were considered, people didn't understand what was autism. And yet later on, they found out that some of the high-end spectrum of autism were very high-performing, intellectually high-performing children in certain areas. And that is how they were invited by, companies like Google to, have an interface with machines, because they were able to understand that. Whereas a lot of other people, the normal lay persons couldn't. So all of this is really a very large, of course, issue, and we don't want to go. Very soon we shall probably bring some of the conversation not to a close, but at least open up to the public, and to start responding to some of the questions that people may have. So with this, maybe we can start off. Ankur, if there are questions that you see.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ganesh sir and Anju ma'am, for an insightful session. We've got a few questions already.
Yeah, I can see that.
First question was that suicides begin in students. Which age group?
Sorry, what was that again?
Suicides begin in students. Which age group?
I don't have that data on the age group because there's a block. I don't have it offhand, but you can look at the report that we have. Maybe there's some data on that. I'm happy to share our volume 2 of the Averting Student Suicide report that we have created. And we've found out the 5 factors why they happen, etc., and all of that. And body image is also one, academics pressure is one, financial pressures is another. In the slightly older kids, love relationships is also a reason for suicide.
Yeah.
Actually, so there is, I don't have any data to give you on when it begins, but I'm assuming it's mostly after middle school or from high school onwards that we generally see this trend.
Thank you.
The next question is, how can educators balance healthy competition with fostering competence?
Anju, you want to take that? Or
I think we kind of did touch upon that, but Ganesh said, I'll also put my 2 bits then. I can add to whatever you want to say.
Yeah, actually, competition will get taken care of if you help develop competence. The way the child develops, the child is naturally competent, and you just keep nourishing that competence, and he'll deal with competition quite well. So I think we've said a lot about this already, so I don't want to say too much more. But I would say that for me, competition gets taken care of when competence is developed.
Yeah, I think we just to sum up again what we had already said, that you're not competing against somebody. In the last few years, we have put a lot of emphasis on external factors with grades, marks, outperforming others, you know, where is your rank, etc. So you're always competing against somebody, which means that you're not working with anybody. And we know now that in tomorrow's world, in the world to come, in fact, in the world of today also, collaboration is one of the most important skills, whether you're talking in companies or any kind of work. Collaborative efforts are going to lead to innovations. In fact, how do you innovate? Innovation can happen only when there's collaboration. Innovation can't happen just in an individual effort. So creativity can be individual, but innovation is collaborative. So, you know, in the world to come, collaboration is very important, and collaboration does not exist if you're competitive. But you can compete against yourself. So healthy competition will be, I get inspired by somebody. If somebody is doing something well, I can learn from them. I can do better from my last performance. I take feedback from others. I ask others, okay, I did this. What do you think of this? Whether it's a painting or any other work. So I think that's the way to be open. But of course, we need to create an ecosystem. That's where educators are going to be so important in encouraging young people to have a safe space where they share feedback, give valuable feedback to each other, and even from the teacher's perspective. So that's also part of the HPC, but that's for another day. We can go to another question. I hope that was satisfactory.
So in some schools, parents are not on the same page as teachers, as they're only looking at competition. What is your advice to all the teachers on how to handle such parents?
Okay, that's going to be also from the counseling perspective from Ganesh, Yeah,
Sure.
and then I can also say something.
So I don't know how many of you have seen a tigress with the cubs. And if somebody comes close to a tigress with the cub, what happens? You know, the tigress becomes ferocious. Parents' love is blind love. They really think that I need the best for my child, etc. And they don't know any other way. You know, reproduction is a biological process. There was no university for parenting. We are all victims of victims, actually. And what has happened is that these victims are imposing their ideas from their time. They experience some school trauma, etc., and their children are kind of become victims of that. So the way to work with parents, really, in my experience, is to work with their fears. Most of them are unacknowledged, unconscious fears. And it's amazing. A very wealthy parent I found when in my counseling days, a very wealthy parent, his greatest fear was my child will be poor. That if I make certain choices, my child will be poor. He's fighting with the biology teacher because he thinks that, you know, if you don't teach biology, not become a doctor, my child is going to be poor. I know there's only one way to be. And this is not conscious, actually.
Yeah.
So counseling really is also an art of looking deeply a little bit. You know, many parents are not just acting out of blind love. They are just out of deep love, but blind love for their children. And so that is very important to do, is to be compassionate. You know, you judge a parent, you lose a parent. You have to hold a non-judgmental, non-critical space. Most schools, parents and school are at loggerheads. It's very rare to find schools where parents and school are one unit. One principal, in fact, told me half the time I'm in court, half the time in school. I said, what happened? He said, 32 court cases are filed by my parents against me. I said, what happened? How is this possible? You know? So it is really important to make them allies. We are no longer in that patriarchal, hierarchical world where schools were created for the industrial revolutions for compliance. Schools are a place for creativity, not for compliance.
Yeah.
We were asking during the industrial revolution period for people to be compliant. They had to memorize things, repeat things, and follow rigid instructions. That's how schools were modeled around the prison, the military, and the church temple. Ring the bell, wear the uniform, and, you know, trap them. Principal is the chief jailer, teachers are the sub-jailers.
Yes.
Now, this model of schooling doesn't work anymore. So it is very important. If you're trying to fit the parents in this model, you don't give them a voice, you don't involve them, you don't honor them for the fact that they've brought these children on the planet and they're being sent to school. You don't leverage their expertise. You are going to have, you're trying to get them to be compliant, you will have problems. The moment you find creative ways of engaging parents and allow creativity to be at the center of everything that you do in school, you will solve your issue with working with parents. By the way, we teach at the IC3 Institute an entire module, 4-hour module on working with parents. And it is about working with their fears. Actually, working with parents is simply about working with their fears.
Very, very well said, Ganesh. And I think generally there's a lot of anxiety. And I think many a time parents just want to be heard. That's it. Once you hear them already, they feel settled. They already have voiced something. And of course, everything that you said, it's very, very valuable. And I hope that some of the people will go and join your module because that's so very important. I think also the fact that, ours is a colonial model of education, the prison model, the factory model. And as we are changing the paradigm, the world has changed. We need educational systems in India need to change. Then, of course, the pioneering efforts, the first few schools for the next few years, the teachers will have to also counsel parents. You will have to engage with parents and reassure them. And that's the only way to move forward to address their fears. You're very well said. Okay, let's continue. Thank you, Ganesh.
So how do you train teachers on counseling? That's the next question.
I think join IC3. They are training teachers.
So we actually, the IC3 Institute does 3 different kinds of trainings, a 1-year training, a 3-day training, and a 30-hour training. And all of this training, including accommodation and meals, is 0 cost, not 1 cent from the schools. And that's the beauty of the work. But essentially, you need different kind of training for different stakeholders. Principals need different training. So we do it over a 3-day program. Every teacher needs some basic 30-hour training. We do it virtually over 30 hours. And then the dedicated counselors in school need the 1-year program where they do 4 residential weeks. The approach is every teacher as a counselor, every activity as a counseling activity. School assembly, everything becomes counseling. Class, everything becomes a counseling opportunity. So that's the approach you take. And therefore, you need training for all the different stakeholders. You can find some of that training. There are also lots of resources online. We can share a list of resources. You don't need to worry about spending your resources at school, but you have to invest your time. And that's why I said teachers, 70% with the students, 30% work on themselves. That is important. You have to give your time, and that will really help you help your students better.
Yeah. I think I just want to add here that, I have attended some of the workshops that I've done with Ganesh and even with his wife. And those are some of, they're slightly different, but they're inner child development. And those are such important, valuable things when you invest in yourself, to know yourself better, to clear out past traumas. Because as teachers, when we go into the classroom, we are carrying our traumas and our past baggage with ourselves. And if we don't clear that, then something triggers us. And those are, again, unconscious things. And everybody pays the price, from the child to the parent to the teacher and the school management. So I think it's a very valuable thing to actually deal with that. There's another interesting question about textbooks.
Yes, that's the next one.
This is my favorite, no, we don't need textbooks. Well, at least in our school, we did away with textbooks 25 years ago, and we are doing projects. But today the NEP very clearly, and the NCF also very clearly states that the textbook is not a requirement. It is a guide, but you can do in your own way through activities, modules, projects, real life learning. So this is definitely in the national policy now. You have to go beyond, and we said that if you're going on a field trip, you're learning so much more. If you invited somebody from outside, an artist or an artisan, to connect with the children are learning from that person, and they're learning way more than perhaps what a textbook can teach them. Also, remember, textbooks are centralized, and this was brought in by the Britishers. Till the Britishers came to India, schools were local schools, and the idea of the textbook came from the British model, the colonial model of education, because they needed to do away with the agency of individual headmasters, local teachers in villages and small areas, because that was outside the purview of the control of the British colonial masters. So this is what we need to understand. That's why. So we need to have an emergent curriculum. The curriculum has to be contextualized, and therefore the NEP is talking of that, and we can easily move away from the textbook, but fulfill the competencies. Now, the curriculum, the syllabus is competencies, not topics. It's competencies. Is the child able to do this? And if they can, then it is completed. The curriculum is completed. So of that, we will be, of course, having some other talks on that. But I hope that responds. And the competency of the teacher helps. Yes, the teacher has their own area of expertise. But remember, today we have so many resources. We can do collaborative work with other teachers and make it interdisciplinary. We can make it, multidisciplinary. And you have so many resources from the internet to people to, whatever. So it's not just depending on my competence. If I'm trying to do something, I've gone on a field trip, I don't know enough about history, but I can ask, we can research, I can get architects, to, parents to come with us. They would also, chip in. So it's not just dependent on the individual limitations of a teacher, whatever they may be. That's, I think, what I wanted to share. I don't know, Ganesh, you can add if you want to say something on this.
Not really. I'm not such a textbook person, but I think that, even if you have textbooks, which many systems do, it's really important for the teacher to take every page and every chapter and really define the context. Where in their life is that page? Where in their life is that chapter? Right? If you had to go the other way, like start with a textbook instead of start with a project, then you need to make sure that you are able to link the textbook with their life. Because when I see my life in my academics is when academics become fun. And when I see academics in my life is when, my academics become fun. So I think it's so important to do that. But I think, Anju, you answered that really well.
I think there's another very interesting question. Do you think the competition for being on the top amongst schools is also adding? And yes, Suprabha ma'am, absolutely right. Schools are also competitive. And perhaps we need to understand that we don't need to be competitive. Anyway, there's such a dearth of good schools in the country. And every school is catering to a different kind of population, philosophy, doing a different kind of work, which answers and caters to the needs of a different kind of public. So instead of actually competing, if we were collaborating, and working and helping each other, no need to reinvent the wheel. I can borrow your ideas, you borrow my ideas, and if I become better, you become better, we both will become better in whatever we are doing. There is really this idea of my kids ranked higher is also something we need to do away with. And I also saw that there were many circulars or guidelines even from the CBSE to say, don't put the ranks, don't say this kid was on the top, this is the maximum marks or whatever, and because that's what brings the pressure. And imagine the kid who's worked so hard and the kid has got 80% or 60%. This kid feels let down because his or her name is not there. Just one kid's name is there, and because it's such a high, ranking or whatever marks. So let us celebrate in different ways rather than, trying to outperform each other or to show that we are better than somebody else. So this, I think, it begins at home, begins with self-introspection. And I think schools can also move away from that, find other ways of celebrating children's achievements. But let's say you could celebrate different kinds of achievements of children. And that already gives value to different kinds of competencies and skills. So maybe that's one way, but I'm sure there are many, many other ways of doing it. A lot of other people would have other ideas. So yes, I think that was more or less towards the last question.
Question.
Yes.
Where it is, in most adults, the inner child disappears as they grow up, probably blurring the competency too. Will mindfulness be of help in rekindling the same?
Ganesh, you want to answer that?
Yeah, we get adulterated. As we grow up, we get adulterated. And we get adulterated. Life happens. And so we lose those qualities that we have as children. And there are ways to reclaim those qualities. And, mindfulness does help. Meditation does help. But there are other techniques to reclaim your childlike qualities.
Yeah.
And that work is called inner child work. It is John Bradshaw's work, and it's very therapeutic. It's very helpful. It helps you connect with your teachers well in class. So I've been very fortunate to facilitate some of this work, go through it myself. Anju was referring to that work that
Yes.
she and Pascal and all her teachers have done with us as well. Many of her
Yes.
teachers have done.
Yeah.
So you can actually do inner child work, Suprabha ma'am, and that will be very, very
It
helpful
is,
for
yeah.
all your teachers,
It's really wonderful. I really, yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting. The word adulterated is like adults become adulterated. And this is a very Rousseau-esque, Rousseau, the French philosopher, or if you even look at, Tagore, Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, I think they all were on the same philosophical idea that the child has to be nurtured and nourished. And as we grow older, we lose that quality. So how do we do that? Mindfulness is one way, but then mindfulness is very internal. I think, like Ganesh said, we need to do a certain range of things with somebody in a counseling space and activities where we open up that and we go to that wound, because see, our conscious mind is closed that wound. There's a trauma in our minds, in our hearts. And if I'm alone, I will not be able to access it, mostly. So it's really important to engage in those kind of workshops where I'm able to access that, open it, unravel it, deal with it, and come out of that. So unless I do that, it's still part of my consciousness somewhere. And this is a very important gift to ourselves, I think, as individuals, as human beings, to just come out of that horrible things that somebody, some small thing somebody has said, it becomes traumatic. So we need to do that. And also as teachers, we need to become conscious that everything we say to the child is also being registered consciously and into the subconscious. And sometimes inadvertently we say things, not aware. Sometimes we think we're joking or a casual remark, and that destroys a child. So I think becoming aware of that would be such an important first step. Becoming aware of what I speak is really, really, and what do I do? How do I act? How do I behave? Is very important, because we are the guides for these children. Yeah. So I mean, I can go on speaking, but I shall pause there.
So last question. Thank you so much, Anju ma'am and Ganesh sir, and to all the educators for participating in today's session. We hope this session has provided everybody valuable insights and practical tools to have a more supportive and inclusive educational environment. We've shared a feedback form on the chat. It would be really kind if everybody could please give us their feedback on the session.
And there is also a document there which is attached, which you can download. It is just some little bit of writing on competence in competition. But I also want to end on one little note. One of our students, Riya Singha became Miss Universe India in this year's competition.
Oh.
And that is such a hard competition, right? Why I'm talking about it? Because this young girl was a shy girl in school, and she managed to get onto a very, very competitive field and do very well because she won the competition. She was just 19. She is 19. All the others were much older. How did she win? We asked her, because when she came back and she met us and we chatted, and she said, because she was not competing with anybody. She just found out, she says, ultimately, through the schooling, I found out who I was, and I told myself, Ryu, you only have to be yourself. That's all. Just be yourself. And I thought, wow, what? It's a lifetime's experience to just be yourself. To find yourself and to be yourself is the biggest gift we can give to ourselves and to others. Competition is a byproduct. Winning or losing is all of that is all byproduct. And it'll happen. We will achieve what we want to achieve if we are in harmony with who we are. And with that, I'm not going to speak anymore. Otherwise, I should go on. Thank you. Thank you, Ankur.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And thank you, Anju ma'am and Ganesh sir. It was really, really insightful. And I could also myself resonate with a lot of the things that you said.